Okay, I think we are live. I think everything is working. Hey everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Elaine Canyon, and this is the Authortube Writing Conference, and I am super excited to be here. If you guys see Shannon, SD Houston, in the chat, make sure you give her the biggest virtual hug. She is amazing and fantastic, and this whole thing is her baby. This is the only free writers conference I know of that doesn't like make you sign up with an email address or anything like that. We're not going to bug you afterwards. Except to say, please come back next year. So if you see Shannon, make sure you give her a big hug, tell her thank you, because this is her baby, this is her brainchild, and I think that it is absolutely fantastic, and she deserves all of the love and support that we can give her. Same for Margaret, and same for Devin. They have just put their heart and soul into this. So I am very grateful. Thank you, ladies. This is so much fun. I've had a great last 2 days. And I hope everyone is excited. I've been seeing a lot of people in here saying that they are also in similar boats to me as far as the neurodivergent cocktail goes. So we're going to jump in and we are going to go through this. If you have questions, I will absolutely have time to answer them at the end. Do me a favor and put the letter Q in front of it for me. That's just going to make it super easy for me to go back through the chat and find it. It's also going to help my moderators notice when there's questions, so that if they see a question and they notice I'm not answering it at the end, they can find it and they can say, oh, hey, so-and-so asked this question and we need to get it answered. So let's dive in. So we're going to come to here. Yay, it works. It says it's working. All right, so this is Beyond the Label, an autistic perspective on writing. So we're going to jump in and go, all right, who am I and why am I talking about this? So my name is Elaine Canyon. I'm a Christian. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I am a wife to a wonderful husband, and I'm a mother to 2 amazing children. I am the author of romantasy comedy stories. So I write romantasy meets rom-com. I started writing in this genre mashup in fan fiction. And that was where I found my love for writing, and it naturally followed me into my original fiction. So a romantasy comedy is a romance set in a bright fantasy world with characters and situations that are sure to leave you laughing. So my neurodivergent cocktail is autism, OCD, and ADHD, all of which I learned I had as an adult. And I have not chosen to pursue a medical diagnosis on this. All 3 of these are things that I've had therapists tell me match my life experience. And I've chosen not to pursue a medical diagnosis because at this point in time, therapy is working and I don't have a need for trying medication or things like that. I am a former graphic designer, and that was what I did full-time before moving to writing full-time. And I am a mountain girl. I live in a rural community in the mountains of central Utah. I grew up in the mountains of Utah and Colorado, and I absolutely adore being in them. They are my favorite place to be. Okay, so before we start, I am not a therapist. I am not a doctor. I am not a medically trained professional. And so because of all that, everything I'm going to share with you today are things that are my own opinion, and they're things that have worked for me or things that my therapist has suggested that have worked for me, and I hope that they could work for you. Please know that if you are struggling and need professional help, don't hesitate to reach out to the trained professionals to help you. I am not a substitute for a professional medical medical professional help. There we go. I can get my words right, I promise. Sometimes. Only sometimes, though. So this presentation comes with a heavy dose of optimism and positivity. Please know that if you're not in the right headspace for that, that's okay. This presentation will always be here on my channel for you to come back to when you are in the right headspace for it. I'm going to direct my comments to people who are neurodivergent. They either know they are or suspect they are, and similarly, the tools that I'm sharing, they've worked for me, and they both inside my writing and in my general life. Everything that I'm sharing for you is how I manage to function in the world at large regardless. These are the tools that keep me moving forward and always having continual forward progress. This is also a safe place. So regardless of how you've come to know that you are neurodivergent, you are welcome here. Whether you have pursued a medical diagnosis, whether you want to but can't, whether a therapist might have suggested that neurodivergence is part of what your life experience entails, you're welcome here, and this is a safe place for you, and your experience is a valid one. So whatever path has led you to knowing that you might be neurodivergent or you are neurodivergent, this is a place where you are welcome and accepted. Okay, so what's with the slides? Because I chose these slides on purpose. I love these slides. My neurodivergent cocktail is autism, OCD, and ADHD. Your neurodivergent cocktail is likely going to be different than mine, although I did see that I've got someone in the chat. I've got Morgan in the chat who has the same thing, which I thought was kind of cool. But even if you do have the same neurodivergent cocktail that I have, your experience and your difficulties are going to be different than mine in certain aspects, and they'll be similar to mine in other aspects. That's one of the nuances. I'm going to use the term nuance very, very generously for the term neurodivergent, because neurodivergent includes autism, OCD, ADHD, general anxiety disorder, depression, like there's bipolar disorder. It includes so many things, and they are so different. But there's one consistency that I found with every neurodivergent person I've talked with, and that is that to one degree or another, we all feel that we don't necessarily fit into the world that we are currently in. I spent several years of my life trying to find ways to fit in and making myself absolutely miserable. And the miserable, it didn't stop when I stopped trying to fit in. It stopped when I changed my perspective. So all of these slides are fantastical and whimsical, and it's on purpose because I no longer look at the things in this life that I don't understand or the struggles of working in a neurotypical world as these massive frustrations and problems that I'm trying to overcome. I view them as, or I try to view it as looking at the world as though I'm the whimsical character exploring this new place. And I will tell you that the neurotypical world is a bit mundane in comparison to my world, but it's still an adventure, and it's fraught with all the excitement and setbacks of a cozy fantasy slice of life novel. So as I share with you what works for me as a woman writer with autism, OCD, and ADHD, I invite you to adopt a similar perspective. Whether it's a cozy slice of life fantasy or an alien exploring a new world, or simply just a small town girl or guy in the big city, for just this presentation, I invite you to set aside all of the frustrations that often come with neurodivergence living in a neurotypical world and reframe yourself as the character living in a new world or on a new adventure, and all of the experience and growth that can come from that. All right, so if you're in and you're ready to approach life with a little bit of whimsy and fantasy, then let's jump right in. So I'm going to cover 3 tips to help you as a neurodivergent writer. And like I said, these are things that help me in life in general. This is how I function. So the first is to know yourself. We're going to learn what your neurodivergent or how your neurodivergent cocktail impacts your life and why certain things happen in certain ways. Then we're going to talk about being flexible. You may not feel like you change, but you do, and the circumstances around you will always be changing. And so that flexibility gives us power amongst that change. And then finally, we're going to talk about finding your system. So one size fits all usually won't fit neurodivergence. Just as a general rule, it doesn't work. But you can build custom systems for yourself that work for you. And we're going to talk about methods to do that. And I'm going to share a couple systems that work really well for me and other neurodivergents that I know. So know yourself. You may have heard the iconic line that's inscribed outside the gates of the Oracle of Delphos in Greece, and it's know thyself. and this is what has made the biggest difference in my writing journey. I grew up in a home of neurodivergence, and I married a neurodivergent, and my children are neurodivergent. So it was really easy to assume we were normal and everyone else wasn't. And that attitude encouraged me to kind of ignore my own behaviors through justification that this family member or that family member does it too. So it wasn't a big deal, that it was a normal thing to do. And I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that neurodivergent behavior is bad. But what I am saying is that it's important to come to understand why we're doing the things that we do. And as I came to understand that, it made a massive change to the way that I function, and especially in my writing. You'll hear a lot of advice in the writing community, and being able to throw out what won't work for you the moment you hear it keeps your forward momentum going and cuts down on the amount of times that you're going to have a moment that you feel like you failed. And if you are in a similar boat to me, failure is something that we work very hard to reframe and not focus on, because as I'll explain as we keep going, my OCD is not kind to the feeling of failure. Okay, so I wanted to share some personal examples of how knowing myself and how my neurodivergent cocktail mixes with life and writing a voice helps me avoid common writing advice that makes sense for a lot of neurotypicals but does not work for me. So you can't write if you don't read. That is something that is absolutely everywhere. I've heard it, I can't count how many times, and I'm pretty sure I've yet to find a writing podcast that doesn't come back to this at some point. My autism internalizes everything that happens in a story. And I mean absolutely everything. I've learned with time how to put up walls to protect myself, but watching TV or reading a book or playing a video game can quickly become a traumatic experience if I'm not massively careful about the media I consume. So that's part of the reason I started writing. When I'm the one writing the story, I'm in control of what happens, and I know I won't be the one throwing myself into weeks of trying to pull myself out of the mental chaos. Now, this isn't to say that I don't read or that I don't watch television or movies or play video games. It just means I'm very careful about what media I do consume, and I usually spoil stories for myself so I know in advance whether or not it's worth going into. And I find other ways to make sure that I'm understanding things like structure and tropes and whatever else may be popular in my genre right now. Another piece of writing advice you hear all the time is don't revise while you're drafting. Now, this is a piece of writing advice that also is everywhere, and if I followed it, I would never finish a book. My OCD usually stays in the morality department, overanalyzing if I've been a good person in everything I've done my entire life. I have learned that having that part of my OCD managed and under control is far more important than these little things like stacking bowls in a specific color order, which I do, or revising and editing my draft while I'm writing it. So sure, there are people who won't finish books because they will spend years revising a story and never getting past chapter 10. I am not one of those people, and giving my OCD this outlet is much less exhausting than adding it to all of the things that I do need to keep under control in order to stay mentally healthy. And then write every day. My ADHD is the chaotic neutral in my neurodivergent cocktail. If I tell it that I must write today, it will rebel just for the sake of rebelling. If I try to set smarter goals, it will deliberately pull me off course. And then it's a terrible little thing because it will go talk to my OCD and convince it to go into hyperdrive about what a failure I am for not sticking to my goals. So I have learned to work with my ADHD, and I don't make the goal to write every day. I don't even really ever say I'm going to write every day. I don't wake up in the morning and say I'm going to write today. My ADHD does like my stories though, and so I keep several projects going at once, and I start each day reminding my ADHD that we have lots of options, and all of those options will push me forward on stories. So I can work on book covers, I can do publishing admin, revising, editing, drafting, all of which move me forward. And usually my ADHD chooses to write, because now it's not a you must write, it's a look at all of the fun, pretty things you can do. And usually it wants to know what happens next in my stories. So I get to write because I want to know what happens next. This is a huge reason, and I think probably the main reason, that I am a discovery writer. So knowing yourself, and specifically how your neurodivergent cocktail mixes with your daily life, and especially your writing, gives you the ability to see both the good and the difficult in how your brain functions, and then build the tools that make life not just easier, but more enjoyable too. So my neurodivergent cocktail comes with difficulties, and that's a given, but it also comes with benefits. And I think we don't focus on that enough. Finding the benefits of the way your brain works turns your neurodivergence into a superpower. And I've listed some of the superpowers that I feel I have because of my neurodivergence on the slide here. And I recognize that my cocktail isn't the norm, that not everyone here is going to have that. And I also recognize that for those who struggle with other types of neurodivergence that include depression or anxiety, that it can feel like you have no superpowers. I have family members who struggle with this. And I promise you, you do also have superpowers in your neurodivergence. For example, those who struggle with depression are some of the best critical thinkers among us. And those who have anxiety disorders are often the most motivated. You can Google this. So if you Google strengths of and then put whatever neurodivergence you're struggling with, that can help you shift your perspective because it will list things. And remember that just for this presentation, we're looking at your neurodivergence and my neurodivergence as a superpower and our life experience as an adventure. So keep that in mind as you're seeing all of this. And I don't want you to feel overwhelmed, but if you're starting to overwhelm, remember, set that aside for a moment and take a break and just say, today, just for right now, just in this presentation, this is a magical adventure that I'm on, and it's going to be okay. So I wanted to take a moment and share something about rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Now, if you've never heard this before, what it is where you feel an extreme emotional sensitivity and pain that's triggered by the perception that you have been rejected or criticized. I tend to only struggle with this when I'm not managing everything else in my neurodivergence, and specifically my OCD. If I let my OCD get out of control, RSD is the first thing that shows up. So I tend to focus very hard on keeping my OCD under control. But the best advice that I got in terms of dealing with RSD when it does show up is to remember that the pain that I'm feeling is real, but the conclusions my brain is drawing almost always are not real. Most people, and I'm going to preface this with a caveat, abuse is a real thing, and you need to seek help if you are being abused. But with that caveat said, most people do not live their lives thinking about how they can reject and criticize you. So remember that when RSD hits, the pain that I'm feeling is real. But if I'm thinking that my husband or my neighbor or my children or another author have deliberately said something or done something to hurt me, that usually is very incorrect about what's going on. And then what I found that the biggest way to help combat RSD in my life is to reach out for connection with people I trust, especially if they're the one my brain has decided rejected me. And so when you do have RSD strike, I very much suggest and invite you to turn to whoever whoever you perceive has hurt you and express that and ask for reassurance. And if you tell your family, especially ahead of time, hey, this is what I'm going to start doing. This is something I struggle with. And when I reach out to you for connection, that's going to help me overcome that pain and help me move forward. That can make a huge difference in how you function. And I wanted to make sure to stop and talk about this because I think RSD is something that a lot of people shrug off, and a lot of neurotypicals will give you the answer, we'll just get over it. And it's not that simple. And so being able to have tools in your belt for RSD is really important. Okay, so I mentioned 2 slides back some of the superpowers that I thought my neurodivergent cocktail had, but let's look at it specifically in a writing context, because this is the Authortube Writing Conference. So here are some personal examples for me about superpowers that I have because of my neurodivergence in my writing. So first is story structure. My autism makes it incredibly easy to see the structure of my own stories. I have no problems identifying where rough drafts need to be adjusted, when scenes need to be cut, figuring out why something isn't working. I still get beta readers and I still do all of the regular things, but most of the real work happens before a second set of eyes ever see the document. And because of this, my second drafts are super clean and they don't shift much before publishing. My second drafts tend to be the draft that ends up being published with the slight different, or with the exception of fixing grammar and things like that. And then I am obsessively detail oriented, which sometimes can be a superpower and it can also be a drawback when I'm not managing my OCD well. But my OCD's attention to detail keeps the work that I put out very high quality. I am not capable of putting out a book that I don't feel is my best work, from the cover to the story itself to the editing. I want it to be my best, and if I am concerned that something is wrong, I will fix it. I caveat this with the reality that I am far from perfect, and I have learned to manage my OCD to the point that I can accept my best rather than the impossible perception of perfection that it wants. No, I'm not perfect at that either, but we're getting there. We're getting better at it. And then discovery writing. I will fight you. Discovering writing is a superpower. But my ADHD is the reason I'm a discovery writer. And plotting anything out will absolutely kill my desire to write it. I've only made that mistake once. Never again will I kill a story by plotting it. But discovery writing keeps my passion for writing alive. Discovery writing discovering the story as I write it keeps me coming back to the keyboard again and again. It gives my ADHD something new and novel to discover every day as I find the story, and my brain is trying to tell me like what's going on and what's going to come next. So I feel confident that I will be writing for a long time. I've already been writing for 9 years. I only recently decided to start publishing. I still have ideas I want to write, and as long as there are stories for my ADHD to discover, it will want to discover them. All right, great. So now what? I've talked about knowing yourself. So how do we actually get you to know yourself, and especially when it comes to your writing? So keeping track of you. Before you panic, this doesn't have to be this massive spreadsheet full of 5-minute increments from your day and the moment, like starting at the moment you wake up and going until you pass out. Now, I will preface that if that is your like cup of tea, then by all means, go in full force and totally go for it. But I know that for a lot of us, thinking about doing things with spreadsheets and keeping track of what's going on, that's overwhelming and terrifying. So tailor this to you. All this really needs to be is something to help you keep track of what's going on in your day and how you're reacting to it. So we're keeping track of what you're doing, where you're doing it, what you're feeling while you're doing it, and what you're thinking about it. I jot down notes in my paper planner. I have a paper planner and I put all of my notes in there throughout the day of, I was working on this and it was awful. Or I was working on this and I just couldn't wait to be done with it. Or I was working on this and I didn't want to stop and I was really, really mad that it was lunchtime and it's summer and I have children to feed because I can't not feed children. That's not okay. So I jot down all of those notes in my planner. If I'm having a hard time expressing my emotions in words, then I will do emojis. I will just draw what it looks like what I feel. And that works too. And I know what those emojis represent. And so it makes it easy for me to go back and track what's going on from day to day. But the important thing here for you is to just gain some data. You can't determine what's working and what's not working for you if you don't know what you're doing in the first place. So then we're going to be self-aware. Aside from keeping track of you and your day and everything that's going on in your writing or in your life, if you choose to expand this, you need to be checking in with yourself to see how you're doing. Are you feeling great? Well, then that's awesome. Let's keep going. Are you tired? Well, that's really rough. Is there something we can do to help energize you? Do you have time for a power nap or for a break? It doesn't need to be a therapy session every time you check in with yourself, though it totally can be if that's something that helps you. But the more you do this, the easier it gets, and the more you'll be able to recognize what part of your neurodivergent cocktail is interacting between you and the world around you, and what your emotions are based on that, and how that affects your productivity or how that affects your mood. And you can start to build a picture of, oh, this sort of thing is going to trigger my OCD, or this sort of thing triggers my anxiety, or this sort of thing sets my ADHD off on a tangent and it takes forever to bring it back. That can help you to build an idea of what's going on in your life so that you can start to plan for how to best approach your writing with the neurodivergence that you have. All right, so then I want you to see your superpowers. You will find what you seek. And I'm not saying that your neurodivergent cocktail in this neurotypical world is not a difficult way to live. But I am saying that if it's all you focus on, you're going to miss out on your superpowers. So remember why I chose these slides. They're that reminder for you to look at your life through the lens of your own adventure story. For me, it's that cozy slice of life fantasy, living in honestly a rather mundane world as I try to bring a bit of whimsy and light to it. You choose your perspective. When you choose your perspective, you choose what your reality looks like. If you look for how your neurodivergence is your superpower, I promise you will start to find it. And then ask for help. You don't have to go through this alone. If you are struggling with feeling overwhelmed thinking about all these tips, then reach out to somebody that you trust and explain to them what you're trying to do. It might be a spouse, a significant other, a friend, your therapist, or anyone else that comes to mind as someone you trust to help you learn what makes your neurodivergence your superpower. And they can help you be accountable, or they can help you brainstorm ideas. Now, if you're among the group that doesn't feel or think that there's anyone who can help you right now, please know that I see you and I know that feeling. And if you need to work alone on this right now, I know how hard that can be. So take it slow. You are worth the effort. And I invite you to start looking for people that you can trust to work with this on you. And I also invite you to remember that people can change. And while no one around you might be someone you can trust with this right now, that doesn't necessarily mean they will always be that way. And they might choose to become someone you can trust. And especially if they see you working to turn your own perspective towards the superpowers of your neurodivergence as opposed to the drawbacks that can come with it. Okay, be flexible. This is the hardest of all the tips, at least for me. Knowing yourself and finding your system, they can both take work, but being flexible takes discipline and it takes change. And that's why I'm sandwiching it between the other two. So we'll start and finish with things that are a little bit more doable and they just take work. And here in the middle, we're going to talk about how you're going to grow and you're going to change and the world around you is going to change. And that means that you can't get stuck on something being the be-all, end-all of your writing career. So flexibility is not easy. Seeing change in ourselves can definitely be hard. As neurodivergents, we tend to think in absolutes, and so that leads us to get set in our ways. We don't want certain things around us to change, and we don't always recognize when we have changed. Now, that's not to say that we want things in our lives to be boring. It just means that we have a tendency to think in these absolutes, especially when we are emotionally charged. But these absolutes don't give us the space to grow. Change is the only constant, and that means growth is not only hoped for, it's inevitable. But we get to choose how we're going to react to change. So if we allow that growth to be the pathway for our own personal growth and our own forward momentum, or if we're going to allow that change to disrupt our absolute thinking to the point that we slow our own growth to a crawl. We want to be able to take advantage of change and be willing to let it help shape us and move us forward. Okay, so we know change is necessary, but what do we do about it? How do we make it ours? So, like I said before, flexibility is a mindset shift. And on this slide, I'm going to share with you, or I am sharing with you, what's helped me create that shift in my life and what I come back to whenever I find myself sliding out of a flexible mindset. So the first thing is curiosity. I will be honest with you, my autism absolutely hates when plans change. It abhors it. And my gut response is always to fight back and stay rigid. And I managed this the easiest, not easily, by being curious. So when change comes, I work to stay open to it by looking into the reasons behind the change and how I can benefit from it. Now, this obviously does not make all change feel better, but it does help me process the change before I let my emotions jump in and take control. The logic behind these changes serves my autism. And the more logic I can put around things my autism doesn't like, the easier it is to manage it. And while some changes will always be hard, curiosity can absolutely make some of those changes become great things. Next is grounding. So if any of you have spent time learning about mental health or have spent time with a therapist, you probably already know this term. But grounding is when we bring ourselves back to the present moment, right here, right now. Focusing on the past will often depress us, and focusing on the future can often bring anxiety. But right here, right now, gives you control. You can ground, so you're going to bring yourself back to the present moment in several ways. You can focus on your breathing, doing visualizations, you can listen to music, focus on your surroundings, finding a physical movement that helps bring you back to right here, right now. If you want to learn more, just Google ways to ground yourself and you will find dozens upon dozens of methods to help you. Grounding helps you to be flexible by keeping you in the present moment. So change often throws us into the past. I liked it better before the change. Or into the future. My current system is impacted and now the future isn't certain. But neither of those methods help us decide what we're going to do right here, right now, where we have control of what's going on, or even if we need to be doing something right here, right now. Grounding also gives us more control to be curious. And like I mentioned before, curiosity is important to flexibility. And it does that because now we're not stuck in the past, focusing on how the change has made things different, or in the future, focusing on how the change will make things different. Being in the moment allows you to focus on curiosity. Then we're going to think big picture. When things change, we often focus on how that change is affecting us and will continue to affect us. But when we think big picture, and specifically bigger than the change and bigger than ourselves, we create flexibility in our thinking. So some changes feel massive until we look at the change in relation to our entire life. Changes that are massively impactful on our writing or even our lives in general don't hold the same level of power over us when we look at them from a big picture perspective. Now, I'm in no way diminishing the reality that change is hard and often does disrupt our lives. But I am saying that when you can step back and think about it in relation to the entirety of your experience and your existence, it helps you to keep perspective and bend before you break. Last is to focus on your core values. Values give you direction when change occurs. So change usually requires us to make decisions, and those decisions can feel overwhelming, especially if you're like me and your OCD is morality driven. So having a firm set of values gives you a compass to navigate change. Your values also keep you from letting change rule your writing career and your life. the winds of change won't send you to places you don't want to be when you can return to your core values, and those values give you the strength to say no to things that don't align with them. So when you map out your values, specifically in regards to your writing, but also in life, knowing what you stand for and what you don't stand for tells you when to be flexible and when to stand firm and push through on something. So let's just go through a really quick example that I used all of this for in a recent bout of writer's block. So when I realized I was blocked, I started with setting my emotions aside because I didn't want them to get the better than me. My emotions are valid and your emotions are valid. But when I want to be curious, I tell my emotions it's time to wait outside while I look at the problem. So I asked the question, why am I blocked? And a whole bunch of other questions that are here on the slide, and some that were more specific to the story that I was writing. But that curiosity showed me two really important things. The first was that I was stressed out. I had taken on a lot, both in my author world and my personal world, and my brain didn't have the energy to be creative when I sat down to write, no matter how much I wanted to see the story through to the end. And the other thing that it showed me was that I wasn't quite sure where the story went next. And because I didn't have the creative energy and mental energy to focus on it, my brain had just stopped. So then I went over to grounding. And in grounding, one of the things I'll do is I'll stop and I say, what are the facts? And I don't let there be emotion behind it. I just want to know what actually is happening and what actually is not happening. So I spent time combating fear, because the writer's block definitely brought on fear through this grounding. The fear was finishing the story was integral to me being able to keep editing the book that I'm currently editing. So when the writer's block hit, my fear was that if I couldn't get this story finished, then I wouldn't get that book that I'm editing done in time for release this fall. The grounding also helped me fight off the depression from looking backwards at how I have finished dozens of other drafts faster than this one. And being present in the moment helped me focus on what was working and everything I was able to accomplish despite how difficult things were at that time. And then the big picture, asking the question, is it really a big deal? And sometimes the really a big deal for me means, is it something that I can never bounce back from, or is it something that I can bounce back from? So thinking big picture helped me remember that I have finished every other story that I've started drafting, and history said that I would finish this one too. It also put my fear that I wouldn't get the book out in the fall into perspective. Would it suck to delay the release? Yes. But the readers that I know are excited for it aren't going to write me off as an author entirely, as long as I'm transparent and open with them about what's going on. So if it looked like I really couldn't make that deadline, then I could announce to my readers what had happened and keep moving forward. And one book releasing late wasn't going to end my career. And then my values came into play here. And one of the most important values I have is joy. Do I enjoy writing this still? Joy is something that I want in my life. I live joyfully, and I write because it brings me joy. So that was one of the most important questions I asked in this situation, and I ask all the time, is as though I was blocked, but I was still having fun. I was still finding joy in going back and reading scenes out of this story. And I still had joy in those moments where I did have time to sit down and try to break through the writer's block. And I love these characters. So that gave me that confidence to stand firm. Knowing that the story still brought joy to me told me to hang in there and push through the writer's block, which I did. And as I made adjustments to my schedule and my workload, and the writing slowly came more easily, and I broke out of that block and I finished the story. And fingers crossed, I should still make that fall release for my next book. But back to big picture, if I don't make that fall release, it's not a career-ending deal. It is something I can still bounce back from. Okay, hard stuff is out of the way. Let's have some fun again, because being flexible is hard. And I feel for you because it is hard for me. And so if it is hard for you, you are not alone. But let's talk about finding your system because that can be a lot of fun. So you know yourself and you're working on being more flexible. And now we're going to create systems that can help you be the best writer that you can be. So I'm going to share 2 systems that work super well for me, and I have adapted them. And I'm sharing these because I want to show you how I've adapted it. So the game board method for setting goals is something that I first learned about from Sarah Cannon. The video is linked down below, and it's well worth watching her explain how the game board strategy works. I also did a recap video of it where I talked about it, and that's also linked in the description. But one of my biggest issues that I have with smarter goals is the time-based part. And that deadline feels like a noose. And I will often either cheat or self-sabotage myself just so I can fail the goal so that I can get out of that time-based part of the deadline or at that time-based part of the goal. So like I've said before, my OCD is morality-based. It is a really bad thing for me to consider myself a failure. It causes a lot of really bad mental health situations. So to protect myself, I will sabotage my goals, which is counterintuitive, and I understand that. But when I heard Sarah talk about the game board strategy in her video, she does put a timeline into it. And I realized I could adapt it, and I could take that timeline part out entirely. And then all of a sudden, I had a goal strategy that helped me move forward. And you can see on the slides, you can see where the timeline part comes out. But for the game board method, I'll explain it really quick. The first is that you map out all the steps that need to be accomplished for a specific thing that you want to do, whatever the goal might be. So it might be finish a draft, or it might be publish a book at the end of the year, whatever it is. And then you put them in the order that they need to happen in. And I get really nitty gritty here because seeing all of those pieces listed out gives me a good idea of how big the project is. Notice that I did not say it gave me an idea of how long it would take. That's really important for me. But then I treat the project like a game board. So as I accomplish each task, I can move forward on my game board, and some of the tasks can happen at the same time, so they all move me forward. And I do understand, and I will admit that this is just essentially a really organized checklist. But thinking about it as a game that I get to play gets my ADHD on board. And knowing that this is a solo game gets my autism on board. And taking that time element out of this entirely helps me to manage my OCD. So I've taken something that was really a cool system, and now I've adapted it. I've pulled in the things that are important for me, and I've thrown out the things that I know will derail me. So here's another example. So this is the stoplight system. I first learned about the stoplight system from Quinn Brooks Ward's presentation, Publishing Systems for Neurodivergent Authors, at the 20 Books Vegas 2023 conference. That video is linked in the description. If you just want the stoplight system, start at 29 minutes, but seriously, just go watch the whole thing because they did an amazing job. I have probably watched their presentation 15 times now. I highly recommend it. So Quinn applies the stoplight system specifically to battling executive dysfunction in ADHD, but I have found great success with it, period. A lot of neurodivergents will agree that inconsistency is a constant struggle, but Quinn said something that their coach had shared with them that completely flipped how I view my own battles with being consistent. They said, you can be consistently inconsistent. Which means that we can accept that we struggle with consistency, and then we take control of the days where we feel great and we don't beat ourselves up on the days that we aren't massively productive. So the stoplight system works on a day level or on smaller levels, like a 2-hour block that you have to write, whatever it is, but you start by checking in with you. Are you green and everything is feeling great? That's awesome. You're going to focus on getting things done. Did you finish the scene that you wanted to get done today? Great, you're going to do tomorrow's scene too, or anything else that gets you further ahead. So remember, we know we're consistently inconsistent, so we're going to take full advantage of the days that we feel amazing. Are you feeling yellow right now? Is there anything you can do to help boost you into a green? Would 30 minutes of a video game or maybe an episode of your favorite TV show help get you feeling closer to that green level? If the answer is yes, then you're going to do that first. I can often pull myself from a yellow into a green by giving myself 30 minutes to play Animal Crossing or jumping into an RPG game. Like I'm playing Grow right now, and it's absolutely amazing and fun. But doing something like that for a few minutes before jumping into editing or adminning or writing, whatever it is, then that can help move me forward. Now, if the answer to that question is no, and taking some time for you is not going to help, then you're going to choose your most important task to start with. And if that's all you get done today, then that's okay. But maybe you'll get done with that and you'll feel like, well, okay, I can probably get the next thing done too. So there will be green days, and that's what we're going to focus on, is there will be green days. Because when we're yellow, it's really easy to get into that mode of, well, I wasn't as productive as I should have been. Well, but you were productive on a green day. And so on yellow days, we're just getting the basics done, and anything else we feel like we might be able to fit in there. Now, are you feeling red today? This is where planning comes in. You're going to choose what your red day tasks are in advance. So Quinn in their video suggests that on red days, you write 50 words, but you do you. So what is important is that you're creating a list of red day tasks ahead of time in order of importance. So on those red days, you can turn to that list and there are no decisions to be made. You start at the top of the list, and the goal is to get that very first thing on that list done. Anything after that first thing on the list is a bonus, but the most important thing is that you got that one thing done. Now, you can use the system to help you track as well in getting to know yourself, like we talked about at the very beginning, and how your neurodivergence interacts with your life. And it also helps you be realistic about your expectations. So you can go into the day and say, you know what, today is a red day. I know that this is not a day where I'm going to be super productive, and I can be at peace with that. Or it's a green day, and I'm going to take full advantage of a green day, and I'm going to get everything that sounds like it's fun to do done. Everything that's on my list and all of the things that sound like fun. Okay, so now what? So I've given you two systems that I have personally adapted and have helped make it massively easier for me to get writing done and with my neurodivergent cocktail and just live my life in general. So, but how do you do this? How do you find these things and how do you create systems? Well, the first is you need to qualify what you need in your system. And that goes back to tracking yourself, right? Because you need to know what you are struggling with or what you're not struggling with. If you're struggling with productivity or with finishing drafts or projects, or maybe you just really need someone to help you stay positive or something to help you stay positive, that's going to affect what you're searching for. So whatever it is, you're going to make a list of the things that you need. And that's going to help you in your Google search or in listening to presentations. That way you're not chasing every whim of, oh, that sounds like it could be helpful. It says it helps this person write 50,000 words a year, or whatever the thing is. You don't want to be chasing what isn't going to actually help you, and knowing what you need help with is going to make the biggest difference. Next, you're going to go on a treasure hunt for systems that you can adapt. And I am calling this a treasure hunt because no treasure hunt is quick, and all treasure hunts require digging. Building your own systems takes time and it takes effort. But just like a real treasure hunt, there are massive rewards for not giving up and following through to the end. And just like a real treasure hunt, it's always an adventure and there's always something to learn. And then you're going to reevaluate. I am still building better systems. I'm still learning more about myself, and I'm still shifting based on the changes in my life. And I take time twice a year, at the beginning of the year and the middle of the year, to evaluate my systems and where I am with using them and what's working and what's not, and what I might need to be searching for as I continue to shift and change the systems that I work with so that they best serve me. And then it helps me see when something isn't working anymore. If something isn't working, then I'm going to throw it out and I'm going to go back to step one. And I'm going to evaluate what I need, and I'm going to start the treasure hunt all over again. And then lastly, find joy in the journey. I warned you at the beginning this presentation was going to be positive. But being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world is messy, and there's no easy button. And I've learned that I can either cry and be angry about it, or I can laugh. And crying gives me a headache, so I choose to laugh. I choose to find humor in the mess, and I choose to find joy. And in those moments when it doesn't feel like I can laugh, I remind myself that my emotions are not permanent, my circumstances are not permanent, and I believe that things can get better. Remember, I invited you in this presentation to look at your life as your own adventure. Sometimes my cozy slice of life fantasy has hard moments, just like any novel does. But I have people I can reach out to. I have things that I know will help me slowly return to a better mental space. And I know that those hard moments of tears instead of laughter help me to grow. And even if that's the only good thing that I can find in the mess, it's something I can hold on to until I can see the light again. Okay, I am neurodivergent. I do know how this works. Wait, what the heck did we talk about? So let's go backwards. Know yourself. You are going to ask why. You are going to take the time to learn about yourself and how your neurodivergent cocktail interacts with you and what you're writing and the world around you. Remember, we're talking about what you feel, where you are while you feel it, or what you're doing, where you are while you're doing it, the feelings that you feel, and the thoughts around it. You're going to take time to care about yourself and check in with yourself. You're going to look for the superpowers in your neurodivergence, and you're going to ask those around you that you trust for help. And then you're going to be flexible, and we are going to grow together. We are going to be curious when changes come. We're going to ground ourselves to stay in the present moment right here, right now. We're going to look at all of the changes around us through the big picture lens. If you can still breathe, then nothing is beyond repair. And you are going to establish your core values so that when change does come, you already know when to be flexible and when to stand firm. And then you're going to find your systems and you're going to create them. You need to know what you need in a system. And then you're going to go treasure hunting for systems that you can adapt to your own neurodivergent cocktail. You're going to reevaluate those systems often, because I'm not going to say consistently. You're going to do it often. And you're going to choose to find joy in the journey. Living in the neurotypical world as a neurodivergent can be messy, but it doesn't mean that it has to be miserable. So I invite you to live beyond the labels of your neurodivergence. Let your neurodivergent cocktail be your superpower. Live your life with an attitude that you are the main character of your own adventure in this strange neurotypical world. And it definitely will not solve all your problems, but I promise you that it's a heck of a lot more fun this way. And I'm of the opinion that life needs a lot more fun in it. So thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun, and I've really enjoyed this. Let's see. Wow, the chat was massively, this is cool. There is a lot of chatter in here. I'm going to scan and see if I can find any cues in here. Let's see. Lots of people with all sorts of fun ways that they are doing neurodivergence. RSD does suck. I am seeing that in here. RSD definitely sucks. Let's see. I'm going to come down to the bottom. Let's see. Okay, good. Just making sure I haven't seen any questions. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I found one. Morgan Lee says, how has your neurodivergence influenced or impacted your writing in reference to the types of stories that you write? I write, so this is a really good question. And like I said at the beginning, I write romantic comedies. And the way that I write my characters, especially in romance, there's a hint of neurodivergence in all of them. I don't know if I'm capable of writing a not neurodivergent character. I have leaned in hard sometimes to the neurodivergent tendencies, but I've just accepted that that's the way it is. Like, a neurotypical character just isn't something that I think I can write, because one of my autism's special interests is how people interact with the world. And so I am constantly thinking and looking at the world and how people interact with it and what everyone's doing and why they're making decisions that they're making. And so that shows in my writing. My characters are very self-aware, and my characters are very aware of everybody around them. And then I also write, and I guess I should say this too. I write fantasy on purpose. Not necessarily just because it's cool. I do think fantasy is really cool. I do really enjoy it. But my OCD and my autism mix really well when it comes to making sure that everything is exactly correct and explained perfectly. Which means if you're writing like a contemporary romance, I'm going to tell you exactly how to get to the, let's say the corner diner. I'm going to tell you how far it takes to get to the corner diner. Like you're going to walk 35 feet from from this person's house before you turn left. And it's also south because maybe you're coming from the wrong direction and you need to know that it's also south. Like I tried writing contemporary, that's what it did. And so I don't write contemporary because my brain's like, well, they need to know. And I recognize that no, they don't need to know. But but that's what I do when I write. And it's just so much to take out. And it takes forever to draft. And I don't care for it. And so I write fantasy because my brain gets permission to not think that way and to let it go and say, oh, well, it really doesn't matter which way you turned in the castle. The castle's not real. It's not really there. It's in my head. So they went down the hallway to the throne room and it's fine because I'm keeping track of what floor the throne room's on. And as long as I don't say it's on the third floor instead of the first floor, then we're fine. Like, so it gives my brain permission to chill. Let's see. I'm not sure if I saw any other cues here, which is just fine if that's the only one. Let's see here. Let's see. Oh, I love that. Morgan also says that the superpower of her OCD is her vivid imagination. I love that. I think that's fantastic. That's one of my favorite things. Awesome. All right. If I missed a question, make sure you type it down at the bottom. But I think I got them all. But yeah, definitely fill out that feedback form because there's so many fun prizes in there. One of my ebooks, or not ebooks, audiobooks is in there. Thank you so much to everyone who is saying thank you. I appreciate y'all being here. I hope this was fun. I wanted this to be fun. Life needs more fun. We need more fun in this. But thank you all so much. I should have written it down. This is a classic example of it, but I was going to write down what the next presentations are after mine. I don't remember. I'll let the mods put it in there if they have it, but I don't remember what it was, and I should have written it down. But I hope you'll stick around for the Authortube Writing Conference because Shannon has done an amazing job, so has Margaret, and so has Devin. And we are going to be having a great time. If you are watching the replay, just like Esther says there, make sure that if you do have questions, leave comments. I do respond to all of my comments. I make sure that questions do get answered. And so if you have questions or if you just want advice on something, I'm happy to offer what I have. Like I said at the beginning, I'm not a medical professional. I'm not a therapist. I don't get to actually give you real advice that is guaranteed to help you, but I'm always happy to give you my opinion, and I hope that it helps. I will never give an opinion that I don't think is going to benefit and uplift. So have a great rest of your day. Thank you all so much for being here. I hope you find joy in your neurodivergent journey, and I hope you find your superpowers in your neurodivergent cocktail. If you have had fun, I hope you'll hit the like button, and if you're interested, you can subscribe. I do videos on discovery writing, on cover design, and on self-publishing on a shoestring budget, and I hope to see all of you again soon. Thanks so much, guys.